And it wasn't a kosher restaurant either.
Not really. I didn't know bacon, bacon sandwiches and eggs.
Yeah, pork is the main protein in Germany.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's a yeah.
They just do that to spite us, just about the Jews.
Just out there. Food and
Otherwise, they'd eat meat.
Yeah,
they had a shoot there in the French. It was like in the area there
in Frankfurt.
in Frankfurt.
Wow.
And there's 3 cops standing in front of it with the shoe guns. Nobody was in there, but I on the way going there, I dove in there. The way coming home, they had a meeting at the airport. So all these kids going to Poland and stuff. So
Okay, let's get started. The last thing we were talking about is to purchase from a sharecropper, which doesn't have modern, really so many, yeah. Why isn't it not on? There we go. Which should not have that many modern applications. But essentially, there are certain times where you have to be concerned that the person that you're buying from is not an authorized reseller. And so that was really the thing that we're dealing with over here. Gezela shenishtanet biyad hagazlan. So then the next topic that we're talking about is if a person steals and then the object changes while in his possession. Im nishtanta hagzela biyad hagazlan, afal pishalo nisyashu haba'olim, hare niknes lo guf hagzela. This is a general rule that when you steal something, you have to return the item that you stole. What if the item has significantly been altered or changed while in your possession? So it turns out that through that change, the Ganef acquires the item, and now he has a financial debt to the owner. The Eino Chayiv Lahachzer Eladomim Uvilvad, provided Shelo Yehi Shinui Shechozer L'Kamo Shaya, unless the change is temporary, so that it can be restored to its original state. V'yesh misha omer shegam b'shinui ma'aser tzarich sheishtana gam shem hachefetz. And some say that it's considered to be changed only when it acquires like a new name, like if it has to, let's see, it's been altered so significantly that it's not called the original thing anymore. Like you steal a car, and then a guy takes it to a chop shop and turns it into parts or whatever. So then, yeah, okay. That's a general rule. He doesn't give us any applications here. Now, chomrat gezel harabim, the seriousness of stealing from the public. Chamor gezel harabim mi gezel hayachid. So stealing from the public is even worse than stealing from an individual. When you steal from an individual, you can appease him and return what you stole. But when you steal from the public, you're not able to receive proper forgiveness and return what you stole to the public. Because you don't know to whom you're supposed to return. And we call makom asulahem chachamim takana. Shalamisha hem makirim shagazlu mimenu yachzirim lahem v'hashar yasum mehem tzarchei rabim lefi hamakom ve'azman. So the rabbis made some level of provision. They said if you steal from the masses, you should return to whomever you feel you can, and then do some kind of public work. The Gemara's example is dig trenches and stuff like that. But the point is that it's very hard to do tshuva from stealing from the masses. V'lo yoel him yitain lamatar tzedakah, and just giving the money to tzedakah is not sufficient. So what's an example of stealing from the masses? If you steal electricity from the grid, or if you steal water from the grid, or if you deprive the public of usage of a public thoroughfare, and things like that. Or if you own a store and you have faulty weights and measures. So over the course of 6 months, you've defrauded the masses. It's very hard to know how to make good, how to make restitution for that theft that you've committed. Okay. Next, Chomer Iser Gezel. This is, we're talking about the seriousness of the prohibition in general. Tzarech ha'adam lihizaher ma'od me'iser genevu gezela, sha'avon chamor ma'odhu. He says it's a very serious crime, stealing. And therefore you have to be very careful about it. Zeh kamo shematzinu b'dor hamabul, sha'af al pi sha'asu harbe averot, lo nechtam gzar dinam ela al hagezel. He says, even though they committed many sins, they were licentious, they committed homosexuality and bestiality and adultery and violence and rape and murder and anything else that you can imagine. But their die was cast when they committed theft, stealing from each other. Ki avon zehu bein lashamayim ubein labrios, because this sin is between God and man. And by the way, we saw in that introduction that he had provided for us that he gave us this, he quoted the Sforno, which I had never seen. I don't recall ever seeing this before. A very innovative interpretation as to why the rabbis say, Lo nechtam gzar dinam ela al hagazel, that the die was only cast because of the stealing. The Sforno apparently says, when a person sins, God will first take it out on the person's possessions before striking the individual directly. But that's only if the person's possessions are his. If the person's possessions are not his, God will go directly for the person. So if a person's possessions are gained through stealing, so then it doesn't give Hashem the opportunity to strike or to afflict his possessions because they're not really his. And so that's why Hashem goes directly for the person. So when Chazal say, Lo nechtam gzar dinam, that Hashem decided to destroy the world because of Gezel, it was because through stealing, God could not punish humanity's possessions. God had to go straight for humanity itself. U'chemoshe matzinu b'karbanos, kishahayu miviim olas ha'of, amra Torah lahotzi mimena hamura'a benotzasa v'yizruku osa. He says, we find an interesting phenomenon by sacrifices. When you bring a bird burnt offering, okay, the sages say you have to remove its crop with the feathers and discard that. So why do you have to do that? And the rabbis tell us, mipnei shaha'ofos nizonim min hagazel, because birds, when they sustain themselves, will steal stuff. They'll fly down onto, Farmer Bob's cornfield and start pecking away at the corn, right? So you don't want to bring that bird as a korban if it's still got Farmer Bob's corn in its gizzard, So you got to pull out the gizzard and discard it before you can bring it on the altar. The ilu bebehema ein zorkim klum ela makrivim al gabi mizbeach. When it comes to farm animals that you bring on the altar, you don't have to discard the gizzard. There's no, animals don't have gizzards, only birds do. But the point is, you don't have to discard the intestines, because whatever food they still have left in the intestine is assumed to be legitimately given to them as farm feed. So that should really bring it home to a person. That if a person has stolen, even his prayers would not be accepted. That's what we learned from this idea of the karbanos. That you stole money and you expect me to listen to your tefillah. So a person will also be separated in the world to come and distant from the righteous, and will not be able to bask in the divine presence. So that's pretty harsh. Yeah. Okay, next. Ritzoy hanigzol acher hashavas hagzela, the importance of appeasement, to try to get forgiveness from the victim of your stealing, even after you return the item. Person can say, well, I returned the item. I did what I was supposed to do. I did tshuva. I'm all good. But this guy who I stole, I stole his car, he's still quite angry. Afal pisha gazlan o haganav hechzeres hagneva, eno nimchalo ela ad shiratze et hanigzal, v'yivakesh mimenu mechila al hatzar shenigram lo. He says, you still are not forgiven until, even after you return the stolen item, until you appease the victim and ask him for forgiveness for the pain that you caused him. The pain that you caused him was no one likes feeling, that, no one likes having their things taken from them.
So if the guy never forgives him, that's on his back. Like
It's
that
that's
has to
it,
be
yeah.
3 times you try, and after that you
Isn't that go under the regular rubric,
You can only hope.
Mechila.
Yeah, well, I mean, in general, in Hilchos Mechila, which is in the laws of Yom Kippur, we find those laws. Because Yom Kippur, in Erev Yom Kippur, the Shulchan Aruch writes, you will not receive forgiveness from Hashem until you receive forgiveness from your fellow. So you have to go to him 3 separate times, and also at one of those times bring over other people with you to try and convince the fellow to forgive you. You definitely have to try your best, and it has to be a sincere effort. The exemption that you have of continuing over and over and over again doesn't indicate that you're in the clear. It just means that you have no longer a halachic obligation to make a shmata of yourself, because you really did give it an effort. However, if we're talking about heavenly forgiveness, there's still going to be the residual of that sin if the guy still doesn't forgive you. Okay. Now, it could be that Hashem will take that into consideration. You're contrite and you really did try. But, okay. Chiyuv hagazlan bekinyan hagzela. The gazlan's liability when he acquires the stolen item. Haganavenu mitchayev al hagneva elim kein asa b'maisa kinyan kigon hagbaha o mashicha mirishus ba'oleha. You don't become an actual perpetrator of stealing until you do something to lift up the item, to acquire it, or to bring it into your domain. So let's give an illustration. Let's say I'm a cattle rustler. Okay, I'm a what do they call those guys? Rustlers, the guys who steal cattle. Okay, so I'm a cattle rustler, and I go in to the guy's corral, and I see a bull, and I start pulling it by its, by whatever apparatus I can, and the cow drops dead before I have a chance to take it out of the corral. All right. So harehu pater. So I'm exempt. I haven't stolen it yet because it's still in the possession of the owner.
But if you caused it to die by the means of how you
That could be something else, right? But let's say I just have really bad luck and this animal has a heart attack and dies without my doing anything other than, just I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I'm going to be exempt. But if it dies after I've already taken it out of the corral, off of the property of the farmer, so then I'm going to be liable.
There has to be a kinyan, there has to be an action. What happens if you caused it not by actually doing something, by arranging something in order for it to happen?
Yeah. Well, let's say I just open up the door of the corral and the animal runs away. So I'm going to be liable for damages, but it's damages, not stealing. I violated the damage. I think that's the halacha, because I never acquired the animal. I've just caused damage to the owner by causing him a loss of livestock. V'chein im higbia es habehema b'rishus habot. Like you could understand. Let's say I figure out how to put your car in neutral on it, and it's on an incline, and it rolls down the hill, and and it gets really, really seriously damaged. I haven't stolen your car, but I've damaged your car. I'm a mazik, so it's a different liability. Or let's say it's a sheep, and I pick up the sheep, even if I'm still standing on the property of the owner, but by picking it up, I've acquired it. So therefore, if it dies at that point, I'm going to be liable. He's just giving us rule after rule after rule, and then eventually, I hope we're going to see some real examples. Kefias based in lahashavas agzela, the based in's ability to coerce someone to return the lost item. Hagana v'hagazlin chayavim lahachzir hageneva v'hagzela. The thief or the robber has an obligation to return what he stole. Based in kofin osam alzeh gam bisman hazeh. Even nowadays, the based in can compel a person to make restitution. And they can, I guess, act with the authority of a marshal, or something like that. What do they call it here? A bailiff? Is that what it's called? To confiscate the items, so as to return it to the victim. I don't know what he means when he says gam bisman hazeh. I mean, in Eretz Yisrael, the Beis Din has to work in concert with the secular court. Beis Din can't just say, okay, we'll get Moshe there, this 6'5", burly guy, to just come into the guy's house and take it, because then that's going to be illegal. So, but the point is that a person has to submit to the authority of Beis Din. Okay, stealing from a stealer. Asr lignov min haganav. You're not allowed to steal from a person who's stolen. V'im avar ve'asa kain hasheni chayev b'hashava leba'olim shel hachefetz. And if he does, the second guy who stole has an obligation to return the item back to its owner. V'asalo lihishtamesh b'geneva olehanos mimena. And he's not allowed to get any benefit or use out of it. And as far as the rights of the victim, of the owner, he can actually choose which robber he wishes to prosecute. In other words, it's not like, I don't know how this works in secular law, but in halacha, it's not that we look at the two of them as collective robbers and we prosecute both of them, but rather we let the victim, the owner of the object, decide which one do you want to prosecute. You want to go after number one or number two, and that'll be the guy that you take to Beis Din.
There's no double jeopardy type of thing?
Right, he doesn't collect twice on the item that was stolen.
But if he steals to give back to the original owner, that's fine.
Is he allowed to steal it in order to get it back to the original owner? So that's a very good question.
If you're the original owner, are you allowed to steal it back?
Break into the house of that person and we took it.
Are you allowed to commit breaking and entering in order to get your item back? Yeah.
No, you're not.
In Canada, you're not.
Right, but if his garage was open and your barbecue that you just stolen is there, you could take it back and there's probably no consequence. Right?
Why do you say probably?
What about trespassing?
You never know if a cop would charge you or something for, going on a guy's property.
Trespassing.
It could be, it would be trespassing, but, okay. I think practically, like in civil law, the guy would suffer no damages from that anyway. Right? Like, what damages did this thief suffer for you hitting the barbecue back?
You have to prove it's your barbecue.
Yeah, so I think sympathy would be for the owner, as long as he didn't break or enter, like break something, break the lock or something, then he's probably fine.
Right. So we do need to clarify this. What are the opportunities for vigilante justice in halacha, right? So let's put it and let's make a mental note of that and see. Hopefully, I'll look around and see it. Yeah, see if I can find something for you. Okay. Misupakim heshiv hagzela. Let's say a person is not sure whether he's made proper restitution. Misha gazal elashu misupakim hechzer lanigzal. If a person stole and he's not sure if he's made restitution, afal pisha hanigzal lo toveya oto chayav lahachzir im balatzeit lidei shamayim. Even though the victim is not demanding payment, if he's not sure whether if he's fully made restitution, he has to go the extra mile so that he removes any doubt. That's in order to fulfill his heavenly responsibility. V'im hu misupak im gazel bichlal, v'gam hanigzal misupak bedavar, pater af bedinei shamayim. If, however, he doesn't have clarity on whether or not he's stolen, and the victim is not clear on whether he's stolen or not, so then he doesn't even have any heavenly obligation. So you can come up with an example where a guy says, look, I'm not sure, I may have taken too many of those widgets when I purchased widgets from you. And the seller says, well, I don't know, I wasn't counting carefully. You think it was 11 and I only sold you 10. And you're not sure, and you don't have them anymore, and I don't know, and you don't know. All right, so we'll call it a day. In other words, that's the attitude. If both parties are unsure whether there was any act of theft, then there's not even both of them should sleep well at night, and you shouldn't give it a second thought. Okay.
Is there a difference between a ganav or a gazlan?
In many of these, in most of the halachas, there's no difference. But when it comes to restitution, a ganav has to pay double, and a gazlan pays the keren.
Wasn't it chamisha,
So the arba of a chamisha is when you steal livestock and you sell it or butcher it. So if you steal a sheep and then you eat the sheep or you sell it, so then you have to pay 4 times the value of the sheep. Okay. Hakona chayfetz min hagazlan, purchasing goods from a thief. Misha kana chayfetz ganuvo gozul lifnei yish ba'alim. If a person steals merchandise from that is discovered to be stolen merchandise, and you steal it before the owner gave up hope of ever retrieving it. In other words, the item is still intact, and there's no reason to assume that the owner has given up on retrieving it. Imhu ganav o gazlan she'enu meforsa. V'lo yada shehadavar shekana ganuv. He says, if you don't know that it was stolen when you purchased it, because there's no incriminating evidence. In other words, everything seemed legit. Okay. Afal pi shetzarach hakona la'achzer es hagenevo es hagzevel lebalim. Yesh al haba'olim la'achzer lakona es ma shelokach leganav o legazlan. Nonetheless, once you discover that it's stolen, you have an obligation to return the merchandise to the owner. But Chazal made a sort of a takana that when you return it to the owner has to pay you for what you paid for that item. Okay, so like I buy a pair of tefillin from a guy with a long beard, okay, and he tells me they're 100% kosher. But then I discover that the tefillin was stolen. Okay, so I have to return the tefillin to the original owner, but the original owner has an obligation to pay me whatever I paid to the ganav, and then he's got to go after the ganav to get his money back. And the reason why Chazal made this takana is because the person who bought it said, "How was I supposed to know it was stolen?" In other words, he's the innocent bystander, and he himself has been victimized. So in order to create a remedy for him, the rabbi said that the owner has to pay him for whatever he paid. Vafilu im hukar haganav achar kach, ein halokeach chayiv lamod b'dinim haganav. And even if you discover who the ganaf is, the purchaser has no further legal obligation. In other words, we put him off the hook, and this is a special accommodation that Chazal made. V'chol zeh asu chachamenu zal mipnei takanas hashuk. It's called takanas hashuk, which is there are a lot of takanas like this. There's takanas hashavim, right, to give an opportunity for people to do tshuva for stealing, but there's also something called takanas hashuk, which is to remedy the marketplace. Because if we don't regulate the marketplace in this way, people are going to be scared to purchase merchandise, and it'll destroy the economy. Shimlo yachziru l'koinem hashashilim laganav v'lagazlan yimneu anashim lischar v'likno zemizeh michshashu ganu v'gozul. That people won't buy or sell to each other, and people are going to be scared to engage in commercial trade, and that'll destroy the economy. V'yotzi mimenu below damim. If we allow people to confiscate stolen items without compensating the purchaser. And even if we place the onus of litigation upon the purchaser, that too is going to prevent people from engaging in commercial trade. But this is all when the purchaser had no way of knowing that the seller was a ganaf and that he was dealing in stolen goods. And you have to be honest about that, right? You buy something off the back of a truck, that's a different story, because there's a greater likelihood. I don't know if people still do that. Oh, you were talking about the boots. Yeah.
That happens.
Yeah, so there I suspect that it's not stolen. It's probably just he's selling without a license, a resale license. It's probably something that, well, in that kind of situation, there's no halacha in the books that says that you have to only sell in certain areas that are zoned for a retail operation. But that's all dina de malchusa dina, right? So then the question becomes, is it indeed dina de malchusa when a guy is selling boots from the back on the hood of his car, but the police drive by there every single day and they don't shut him down? So if the police aren't shutting a guy down, so then there is what to argue that dina de malchusa doesn't care anymore, even though technically he's in violation.
There isn't a law like that.
Or there isn't a law.
Right.
In other words, it goes back to that law that I was mentioning the other day during the Chovos HaLevavos shir, that if the speed limit is 100, but they don't mind if you go up to 120, so then you're no longer in violation of Dina de Malchusa if you go over 100, as long as you stay below what the police will really care about. So there is what to say about that. But if this guy is constantly on the run from the police because he's in violation of Dina de Malchusa, so then you probably would not be permitted to buy the boots from him.
There's
Even
people that
though-
sell companies that sell door to door all the time, it's all cash, and they go door to door. There's companies that do that.
Right, so I don't know what the laws are. What kind of company sells door to door today?
Oh, there's people that still go to
Oh,
offices.
you mean, yeah,
They walk into
right.
offices,
They
they're
will
selling
come into
books,
offices,
they're
yeah.
selling kid books.
Right.
I've seen it.
Is that illegal?
I don't know.
No.
I bought from these people.
It's not illegal, but there's consumer protection legislation that protects these, the old encyclopedia salesmen and all these people that come the door. They have a cooling off period, 10 days or something, to return it if they find out it's, rip off or, whatever it is. There are laws that protect against
can find the guy.
misrepresentation and selling, with, lying.
And also not doing tax, not charging tax.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a concern for the government. Well, you're right, that's Dina de Malchusa, you're not charging.
Yeah, but I as a purchaser don't have to be concerned about whether the seller is paying his taxes. As long as he tells me what the final price is, it's up to him to collect HST and to give the HST over to the government. If he fails to do so, then I'm not liable.
By the way, the secular law on this thing about buying from a thief. So the law generally is if the thief doesn't have title ownership of the good, let's say it's a car, then the purchaser can't acquire title from someone who doesn't have it. But they made an exception for the very reasons that the plumbing did to not chill, commerce or whatever. They developed this principle called if the purchaser is a bona fide, meaning in good faith, purchaser for value, so you bought the car for proper market value, right? It's not hot, the Rolex for $10 or something. And without notice, so bona fide purchaser for value without notice, you didn't know it was stolen, nor should you have suspected that it was stolen, then you do get title, and you don't, and the true owner now says, you got my car, man, give it back. The law says the purchaser, if he's bona fide purchaser for value without notice, gets title to the car.
And that's,
have
but
to
that-
give it back.
but that's what's different in halacha.
Yeah.
In halacha, you have to give the car back,
But for money.
but the owner of the car has to pay.
You could give him the value here, he gets to keep it over the real
Right.
owner's claim. But the owner has rights, they say, against the thief. So the thief
Yeah.
has to pay him for the lost value.
Right.
Of the car.
But the only problem with that law, which is why I like what Chazal did better, is what if the car has sentimental value to the owner? Or
Right.
what if it's a one-of-a-kind item?
Doesn't mean he can't make a deal with the guy, like the guy,
Yeah,
the
pay
guy
double.
would say, I have ownership, fine, but what do you want, what do you want for it, right?
Yeah.
So.
Have a great Shabbos, everyone, and we will meet a week from Monday. I'll be back. I apologize for the lapse. What? 1 week from Monday,
Where are you going this time?
Vienna,
But put it in my pocket.
taking my mother to Vienna to visit her parents.